Hi, everyone. Before we start, I wanted to share something I just found out before the session, and I think it's quite interesting. There's a song that was written for the end of the world, and like a song was written specifically for the end of the world moment. It sounds like this. So it's a true story. It was set up by CNN during the Cold War, because I understand that at that time things were a little bit tense, and it was a very serious thing. There is a note on the tape that actually says that this song should only be played once the end of the world has been confirmed, which obviously is not the case. So please don't tell CNN that we're messing up with our plans. But what's the point? The point, I think, is that we're still here and that we're not done. And yes, we have a lot of work to rectify our trajectory. We need to make better decisions, faster, and drive change at pace. But when we see mega trends, such as the one of the circular economy, arriving that fast, we cannot help but feeling hopeful, motivated, engaged. And I think that this event is a good sign. It's really incredible what Citra and all the project partners have been putting together for us. There's a lot of circular knowledge, influence, and vision in Finland whole during those 2 days. And with that, I would like to welcome you to this session. My name is Camille Duran. I come here as an investigative journalist, but I also run a podcast show called Green Exchange, where we talked a lot about circular economy over the last year. It's our favorite topic. And so I'm very happy to be here. I have a couple of, so this session is made possible by the Nordic Council of Ministers, by Citra, and it's produced by Green Exchange. And I'd like to thank all the project team because it's been a lot of fun preparing this. You saw it on the program. It's called Circular Blueprints Gameshow, and driving the economic transitions in the Nordics and beyond. And that means that we're going to try to do something a little bit different. We've tried to be a little bit ambitious with the format. And with that, I'm going to just go through a couple of practical details. You have the event app to ask the questions, so just make sure you have that handy. You can start asking questions. And I have Matti Eistrich, who should be around here, and he will sit at that table soon to, from the iPad, collect your questions. So that's the man you need to convince. Second, who is traveling from abroad here? Okay, so you probably want to know that this session is being live streamed, so you can send it to your friends and family and show to your children why mommy or daddy is in Finland. Also show them what their future is going to look like, because that's what we're going to talk about, the future, of course. Third detail, I think, yes, on Twitter, if you follow the hashtag for the session, which is on the screen, we're going to feed a number of resources and links so you can build your library in relation to the discussions we're going to have. So just make sure you follow the hashtags and bookmark the content pieces that are interesting to you. So without further ado, I think we're going to start with some inspiration. Who better than the Ellen MacArthur Foundation could kick off this session? No one, really. I would like to welcome to the stage their head of public affairs, Jos Blériot. I'm going to sit on that side.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. And the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, as you may or may not know, is a not-for-profit organization with the sole mission of accelerating the transition to a circular economy. And we are delighted to be part of the organizers group of such a beautiful event alongside Citra and the Nordic Council of Ministers. So it was really important and interesting to listen to the presentations this morning, because it shows that the circular economy is gradually evolving out of the discussion about waste, about materials management, and proving to be more of a systemic proposition. And what do we mean by systemic proposition? Well, I suppose that if we look at the economy as it's worked so far, it's been extractive, linear, take something out of the ground, turn it into a product, sell it to the consumer, and then it gets discarded after use. So it's fair to say that it has had its successes, lifted billions out of poverty and gave access to a lot of material comfort to a lot of people. But as the population grows, new swathe of middle-class consumers emerge rapidly. The pressure, as Yannis was saying this morning, on the resources and on the systems that sustain us is getting very, very important. So it's time for a system change. And it's very timely because that's an opportunity as well, because the digital transformation of the economy gives us the power to have a more decentralized co-creation mechanism. We tend to look at the circular economy, as I said, as a complete system. It's not just a plugin that could be bolted onto linear and do a bit of material management and flow optimization and think we've achieved something. It really is about redefining growth. It's about giving a possibility for our economic models to provide better growth. And how do we do this? Well, first of all, we design pollution and waste out. So the upstream measures of choice editing of materials and making sure that what we put on the market either has a value at the end of use, can be recaptured, or can even feed the systems. Keep products and material in use so that the embedded value of labor, materials, and energy gets kept in circulation. There's no point putting a lot of effort and capital into products that get only a tiny amount of use and then get either discarded or left idle. And of course, both Mr. Steiner and Mr. Potocznik touched upon that this morning. It's about revealing and pricing out the negative impacts. The externalities are nowhere to be seen in our system. There's no cost to them. If we put a cost on these, then we're going to focus on eliminating them, because what gets measured usually gets done, and the cost is very, very quickly identified by economic actors and pushed away. So I guess as an illustration of what I was saying, a lot of waste is currently sitting in the system. Even if we consider that it's really mature and very sophisticated and has evolved and is refined, well, if you consider, for instance, mobility systems, this slide is taken out of a piece of work that we've done in 2015 called Growth Within, which we presented at the European Commission. And we looked at mobility systems in Europe. While the average European car sits idle 92% of the time, which is a considerable waste of time, material, energy, space, public space as well, because it has a lot of impact on the way the city is shaped. And we're in Helsinki, and I know that the city of Helsinki has been very proactive, trying to create better systems so that car ownership, private car ownership, became irrelevant. So rather than tackle the issue by saying we're going to punish individual car users, we're going to create a better system. And that's exactly what the circular economy is all about. In this very same study, we looked at the CO2 emissions and primary material consumption, both from a current development scenario, so business as usual, as we see it today, and a circular one. And you see on the slide here that actually the impact is quite significant. Of course, the dark blue is the circular economy scenario, should you not be able to read this. Index is 100, taken at 2012. So you can see that it really is, especially in the CO2 emission scenario, a considerable reduction in negative impacts. Now, we have also costed that transition. The first report that we published on the circular economy in 2012 revealed that there could be up to $630 billion of saving in net material savings by 2025, and that's looking at adding a loop to the use of most of the medium lift, complex lift products, which is the very poetic way of Eurostat to call your smartphone, tablet, but also your light commercial vehicle or your washing machine. And that's really an important saving, because this applies to only 47% of industrial sector in Europe. So that's only half of the GDP of Europe, and we can save already an awful lot on there. But the technical cycle and the industry is not only the sector in which circular economy, regenerative practices really come to the fore. We're talking about a system that doesn't generate value by extracting and depleting. It looks at rebuilding natural capital, social capital, and economic as well. So growth within the study I was referring to earlier also looked at the food systems in Europe. And if we move to more regenerative practices by harvesting the potential of agricultural byproducts to create fertilizers, for instance, then we could halve the use of fertilizer by 2050. Which leads me to talk about what's going on in Europe at the moment. This is the Manifesto for a Resource-Efficient Europe, and it shows clearly that it is a regenerative circular economy, which is the aim. This was published in 2012, and Commissioner Potocnik at the time has an awful lot to be thanked for pushing this, really. What comes out of this action plan and package, currently, the Commission is busy working on a plastic strategy, and it's something which is very, very important. But also the first piece of legislation that came out of the circular economy package actually is about creating a market for organic fertilizers. So to come to the point that I was making earlier, if we're going to reduce the use of fertilizers and pesticides in the economy, then organic fertilizers need to be able to cycle in the economy. And that's being created at the moment, which really shows that even though the circular economy is a business-driven, innovation-focused agenda, the private sector has to be put at the table with the policymakers and the regulators as well. It really is a co-creation process because a system change doesn't happen by decree. It needs all the actors in a value chain, but also actors from the public sector that create the right enabling condition for such a model to thrive. Now that was for Europe, but I've been asked as well to touch upon what could we see beyond Europe, beyond mature markets. Well, we have published this study last year in collaboration with the United Nations Conference for Trade and Development, looking at India. India grows at a rate of 7.5% a year. It's a massively booming economy, massive booming middle class, with a lot of course, opportunities and challenges that come with it. Now, they kind of stand at the crossroads when it comes to their development path. They could go linear and maximize efficiency, or they could decide that because they still have some room to maneuver, to bypass these and to go directly to a circular regenerative model. But in order to do that, of course, you need to make the economic case. You need to make all the case for the circular economy. And if you look, for instance, at the fact that all the housing stock that will be needed in 2030 in India, 70% of that hasn't been built yet. That's a fantastic opportunity to move directly to buildings that can be modular, that can use materials that are identified and tagged. The digital revolution helps us to actually map material flows, know what's in them, know where they are, and purpose them as we want them to be. So a massive saving, both in terms of energy and materials. And the calculations that we've done show that by 2030, the circular economy scenario, compared to the business as usual one, could reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 44% in India. So we're carrying on in that logic of investigating, making the case for that really big systems change, to really get to a point where we move to a system that extracts and depletes to one that builds and can prosper in the long term. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jos. Thank you very much. I think, do we have a question from the audience or not yet? Do we need to? Okay, so probably, you know, if you have a few questions, get them going during the whole session. We can take them at any time. Maybe I have a question for you. Thank you so much, first of all, for leading the way, because it's an inspiration for many of us. You have innovation programs. You issue a lot of reports that I think we use as a reference, as media, as policymakers as well. One question regarding cooperation and collaboration, which is really one key theme of this session. There are a lot of stakeholders to consider and that should work together, as you mentioned. How do we create diversity in an innovation program and make sure that some of the global brands are very visible in the private sector because they also benefit from the marketing side of things, of going circular and being part of those innovation programs. How about the community movements, the SMEs that are maybe not necessarily disruptors? How do we integrate them? Is it the role of government to taking care of those groups? What do you think?
Well, it's a very interesting question. I think it's the role of a lot of people. And of course, as you were saying, the innovation can come from anywhere, and it can be some guy in a lab with an incredible solution that solves a basic but fundamental material problem. Mm-hmm. And how do we identify this? There's a lot of programs for identifying innovators. Some of them are pretty admin heavy as well. Mm. So it's not always easy for a very small company or a startup to get onto the conveyor belt and really jump in all the hoops. So there is an element of making sure that we include everyone, but there is one thing which is really key to this is the digital enablement part. Mm. Because now the digital revolution allows so much decentralization that a good idea can pop up and be visible very rapidly across a whole variety of stakeholders.
Right.
And when it comes to collaboration, you're right, it is about big brands, it is about government, it's about all of these players coming together, but it will only work if they come together around a very clear destination. That destination is a regenerative economy. Once you make that clear, well, of course, rather than try to balance each other out, like the typical tension between business and government in a linear economy, business wants to maximize profit, government wants to kind of control and mitigate the negative effects. Right. But that only goes to the lowest common denominator. If you go into a co-creation spiral and you agree on the destination, which is a positive, better growth through circular economy, then everyone starts to spiral upwards.
Right. And I think that's a very good transition to what we're going to talk about in the rest of the show. I would like to thank you for passing by.
Thank you very much, Damien.
Please, let's give a hand to Jos Blériot.
Thank you.
So I'm looking at my notes here. Now is the moment to start our game show. So that's where the game part comes in. I have a little device here that I will talk about. We had a lot of discussion with the safety team, with our insurance company, with the engineers for the game show, to find out if we should put seat belts to everyone in the seats. And they said that it should be okay, but I'd like to make sure that you sit comfortably and you can hold tight to the chair if at some point it's shaking a little bit. And I think you'll understand soon. First, I'm going to need some help. I would like to welcome to the stage my colleague Carlotta Cataldi.
Hi, Camille.
How are you?
I'm fine. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Are you ready?
Well, I'm always ready, but for this time, ready for what? I'm not sure. I know.
You don't know the story?
No. And what is that thing?
Careful. It's the comment to our time machine.
Time machine?
Yeah.
Do you mean we're all gonna go back to the future? And meet Michael J. Fox?
Now, we're not going to go back to the future, we're just going to go to the future. Mm-hmm. And actually, I'm not coming.
So, you're not coming?
No, so it's you and our guests.
Okay.
And I'm going to send you to 2050.
All right, but why?
So, we're here to talk about building structural change in our economy, in our society, and it's very hard to do so if you stay stuck in the present, because you just look at horizon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years and get stuck into incremental change. But if you take a time travel to 2050, mm-hmm. and you start to capture and observe all the good ideas from a fully circular economy, because by then, for sure, we'll have figured out, mm-hmm. come back to the present, use all those good ideas to build a blueprint, we're talking about circular blueprints, and then you can ask yourself, what does need to happen in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, for that future to become true? Mm-hmm. And that is called backcasting, and that's what we're going to do.
I like backcasting. Sounds like a cool idea.
It is.
So, why is it called a game show?
So that's a way to make it a little bit more entertaining for everyone and to push our guests to performance. because you will see that we will have two teams, Team Blue and Team Red, and each team will have two missions in the future. For each mission, there will be a time limitation of 10 minutes, and within the time limitation, they will have to capture as many good ideas as possible, bring them back to the present, then we meet in part 3 all together to debrief and study what we learned, put it into a blueprint, and start working.
And what is my role? Why did you call me?
Your mission, if you accept it, Carlotta, is to go with our teams and help them document and take notes. And you know, I know that's your specialty, but this way we have good materials to work from when we're back in 2017. And in the meantime, once you're with Team Blue, I will talk to Team Red in the present to learn about their work.
Okay, well, Camille, accept the mission.
Great.
Thanks for calling. I have another question.
Ah, you have another question.
Because I know you well. Where's the danger?
It's not really a danger, it's a risk. Someone can stay stuck in between now and 2050. And you know, those are rather honorary guests that we have, so you just need to make sure that we don't lose anyone because they're real change makers.
You're a smart man, you're staying in the present.
That's why I'm staying, that's right.
All right.
So how about we call our guest to the stage?
Please.
All right, so I'm going to take my notes just to say, to mention the titles correctly. In Team Blue, we have Elin Larsson. She's a sustainability director at Filippa K, flying from Sweden, I think. Please come onto the stage. So a Nordic textile brand with big plans. There are some marks on the floor, blue on that side.
Yeah, blue on this side.
Marielle Vilea, managing director at Zero Waste Europe, straight out of Brussels. Per Bolund, Swedish Minister for Financial Markets and Consumer Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us. And from the Netherlands, Chris Kuipers was scheduled but had a last-minute family issue, so he's replaced by Witske van der Meij, Deputy Director for Sustainability and at the Ministry of Infrastructure and Environment. Welcome. And that's our Team Blue. And in Team Red, thank you. In Team Red, we have Ms. Kaudia, who is the Environment Secretary in Kenya. Please welcome. You can keep clapping so we warm up a little bit. Nancy Strand, Director at Avfall Norway. Minister Kimmo Tiilikainen, Minister of Agriculture and the Environment in Finland. You know him. And finally, Kari Herlevi, who is Project Director for Circular Economy at Sitra here in Helsinki. Please. Okay. So, there's some teamwork going on already. Are you ready? So first, I'd like to thank you for being willing to be part of this because it's risky. Okay, we're going to put you to work, and we have two of you have a bit of a special badge because you're the captains of each team. So you have a bit of glitter, and you're in charge of the security of your crew, but also of facilitating the discussion into the future, because Carlotta is going to be mostly listening and drawing. Is that okay?
Fine.
Okay, so I think we're going to be ready to save time. You were briefed on your missions. The 4 missions, they're going to appear on screen right now, and each mission corresponds to a sustainable development goal. There is a theme that we use to make the discussion more practical. And then we will discuss all your conclusions when you're back. Carlotta, would you like to take our blue team into their workshop capsule over there, while I'm going to sit with the red team on the chair over here, and I'm just going to keep Miss Kaudia with me because she's going to help me push the button. So please have a seat, and I'll be with you in a second. And Kari, I think I'm going to, as you like, I was right, super. So this is the technical part.
Yes.
And here, there's danger, as we mentioned, so I'm going to be on the other side.
Yeah.
And here, just want you to press the red button when I tell you. Is that okay?
Yes.
Are you ready over there? Are you sure you want to do this? Okay, let's go. So I'm going to first press and then I tell you. Okay? Now.
I go there?
Come with me. All right, so at this point, we don't know what's going on. Hopefully, they reach out okay. How about we have a little bit of a discussion in the meantime? We are going to discuss a little bit of your recent achievements and what's coming up in the next couple of years. And I would like to start with you, Ms. Tren. You're coming from Avfall Norway, which is the waste agency for Norway. And you have a membership which is quite diverse, as I understand. And as you can see in our panels, we have quite a strong Nordic representation, because that's a little bit of the framing we wanted to give to the session, but also with some special guests from other continents. And so Avfall Norway presented a roadmap to the government, I think, circular economy roadmap. And I wanted to ask you how it was received, because you took on this initiative. And can you give us a little bit of an idea of where you're at this point?
Yeah, the roadmap was actually part of a process that was a special committee called the Green Shift Committee from the government.
Yes.
And they asked actually several sectors to present roadmaps.
Yes.
And that was about the transition from the oil and gas economy in Norway. Because at the moment we are quite dependent on oil and gas as part of our economy.
Yes.
And the government said we need a new green economy.
Yes.
And so they actually urged all the society to take part in this process.
Yes.
And then we decided that the waste and recycling sector, we actually need to be part of this.
Yes.
We need to see ourselves as really an essential part of this process.
Right, and something I remember we discussed in the preparation I thought was very interesting. In Norway, there's a big energy transition going on, and you were saying that there's a very strong cultural shift in the energy sector. You see a lot of startups, a lot of innovation going on. The culture is really getting there. In the waste sector, it's maybe a little bit more conservative, or what are your thoughts around that?
Well, I think I need to admit that that was the case. What I think is really good is that this is changing.
Okay.
And it's like, first we thought that circular economy is about recycling, and it is.
Yes.
But now we see more and more, we changed the name waste hierarchy to resource hierarchy.
Right.
So, and we see more and more engagement in this. Reducing waste and reuse, etc.
Great. So we'll get back to this. I'm going to go through the first round. Ms. Kaudia, you're coming from a completely different context. I'm very happy to have you in the panel, and we had some interesting discussions over the phone. Yes. You're very active on sustainability in general. I'm going to quote a couple of hats that you're wearing. You're the co-chair of Green Growth Knowledge Platform. You're the co-chair of the Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So you're really like into those topics with a big picture. And you know, I feel that sometimes in the circular economy discussion, we forget a little bit to contextualize to the global south and to other countries than Europe and America. We hear about China more and more, India, but can you tell me some of the scenarios you're facing? We were talking about the rural areas versus the more like middle-class urban. What are some of the things that you observe on the circular economy?
Okay, thank you very much. I think in the global south, and particularly in Africa, we have three key challenges, and that is ensuring food security and nutrition security, creating jobs for young people, and also desiring to grow. And we find that, for example, in Kenya, we are looking in a nexus way, taking circular economy in a nexus context to link landscape restoration to waste management and air pollution control. And we do this because circular economy for us is all actions that are aimed at ensuring that the quality of life and well-being of people is continuously improved as we pursue growth and development.
Yes.
And preventing emissions, greenhouse gases, and short-lived organic pollutants like black carbon and so on is very, very important for us in terms of human well-being and quality life. But we find that urbanization is also coming up very fast. The middle class with the high propensity to consume is also high.
Right.
And that is generating a lot of waste. And yet, we don't have any infrastructure for managing the waste. And waste is disposed rather through dump sites.
So you have very clearly this rural situation versus urban situation, where also people living in rural areas, they have a more sustainable lifestyle finally than people who aspire to this middle class.
They have higher quality life. I would call it higher quality life, those living in rural areas.
But they don't know about it.
They don't know about it. They consider being in the urban better, yet in reality, being in the rural is better because the quality of environment is higher.
Right. Okay, so we're going to get back to this as well. It's also to tease you for questions via the app if you have some questions for Ms. Claudia. Minister Tiilikainen and Kari Levy, you're a little bit the star of the event here because we're in Finland. You just celebrated the 100 years anniversary of the independence, and you also, most importantly for our topic today, recently issued a circular economy roadmap at Sitra that is supported by the government. And I think that you have a big ambition in Finland. For as soon as 2025, you really want to demonstrate leadership and think as a circular ecosystem. I think that's very interesting. I wanted to ask how this roadmap came about to you, Kari, but maybe before to Minister Tiilikainen about the vision for circular economy in Finland. What's the plan? And before I forget, all the links are being tweeted right now, so you can download the roadmap and download the PDFs as we speak. Please.
Well, the vision is, and the need is very simple. We need to change the paradigm of our economy so that we can live on the annual yield of globe.
Right.
And today we are not doing that. We are over-exceeding all raw materials and energy and so on. So we need to adapt what's going on in nature. There are cycles in nature. Right. Carbon is cycling, water is cycling, and nutrients are cycling. So we set strategic goal in a government. We started to work between ministries. We are trying to start demonstration, references, piloting, and this roadmap was excellent job by Finnish Innovation Fund together with a number of stakeholders throughout the society. And now we are trying to implement it.
Great. Well,
simple.
Yeah. Once you have the roadmap, usually it's just about executing it. But there are some challenges along the way. From your perspective, Kari, how did this happen? And what's the relationship between? So, what stakeholders were involved in defining this? I think that's a very important element for our blueprinting exercise. What stakeholders to involve, and what's the relationship with the government from that perspective?
Okay, maybe we start from the government side. So obviously, it's important to have government on board, and we have had a very good collaboration and discussions, and even in the government's midterm review, circular economy was raised highly on the agenda and in the coming years as well, which is great, and it's really needed. And I think also the kind of personal leadership shown by the ministries as well is important. One thing is that is also important is the kind of cross-parliamentary support for these kind of activities, because it's for long haul, not only for one government term itself. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to the roadmap design process, it was very intense of 4 months period, including 1,000 people all together. And we had
1,000 stakeholders.
Yes.
Wow.
And we used different kind of tools to engage people, even the ordinary citizens. There were 50 key organizations that were working us to define those focus areas, which is important, obviously, and it's also challenging at the same time. And then we open it, the draft online for ordinary citizens to comment, and we get around 250 ideas of pilots and policy ideas as well. So really try to engage, and I think the Sitra's role is really kind of independent facilitator, building the trust between different views as well, which obviously was the case as well, that there were opposite views as well.
And do you think that this is a model that can be replicated or should be really promoted, the learning lessons from Finland through the Nordic cooperation, for instance, and through other European countries or countries from around the world, like this dual, this synergy between the government and the Innovation Fund? Or who should come first with depending on the context, probably?
Well, I was in South Africa, for example, a couple of years ago, and they were thinking that they should also first have the focus areas in order to kind of execute their plans, and it's obviously based on country needs as such. But I think you're right, the process itself has been the thing that most people are interested, because you can learn from it, and we have designed it so that we have a public-private partnership model led by Mr. Tiilikainen and Sitra's board member Kirsi Sormunen over there.
Yep.
And we have 18 different organizations, from trade unions to industry association, NGOs, financiers. So really try to have the holistic view on things.
Right.
And based on that, we have also secretariat of key ministries, from transportation to commerce and agriculture. Really try to have a holistic view on things in the policy side as well. And then we move in the project level as well.
Okay, great. And so that sets the stage also for follow-up discussions on this. What stakeholders do we involve at what points in the roadmap, in the exercise? And also, one point I really like, and I think it's quite a big idea, is to really see this as a circular economy ecosystem that not only is going to benefit the national government, but also you're going to be able to export and inspire other countries to follow. I would like to talk about bioeconomy a little bit, closing the loop of nutrients. That's the term I think that we hear quite often. But not only, it's a strong focus in the Nordics, but many countries are doing it in different ways under different terms. Basically, we're talking about maximizing the value of biomaterials and creating markets around them. But also it raises a lot of questions. Ms. Kaudia, in the rural areas of Kenya, you told me there was a lot of composting going on. Is it in agri-businesses? How is it? What is the world of composting in rural areas of Kenya?
The composting is very useful in the sense that it enables especially the resource-poor farmers, the poor ones, to have their own manure, which is natural manure, because they can't afford fertilizers. But at a larger scale, we also have agro-industries, especially the sugarcane processing industries, generating a lot of bagasse, which can actually be decomposed into manure, and that is a business angle, a business opportunity that exists there. But composting, especially from agricultural waste, from post-harvest of grains and so on, is very, very important in sustaining the quality of soils and the productivity in the agriculture sector.
There are some challenges around water retention.
The challenges that most farmers have is that the productivity of farms has been declining over the years, and therefore even the volumes of agricultural waste is declining. And worse still, many of the farmers whose households which still depend on wood energy for cooking in particular, when they lack the wood, then they resort to agricultural residues as the source of energy for cooking. And that basically is presenting a big challenge in the interface between agriculture and energy resourcing.
Okay. In Nordic countries, when we talk about bioeconomy, we talk about maximizing the value from forests, from the fish industry, and really on the agricultural side of things, we have a lot of issues in the Baltic region, for instance, with the leaks and the nitrogen release. Where is the line between maximizing the market value of a biomaterial and pulling too hard on natural resources. Because if we look at cotton, for instance, I mean, we have a lot of issues around cotton. It's a biomaterial. And we know that now it's competing with land use for food. And at the governance level and in the innovation pipeline, how do we say, no, this is too much, that's going to stimulate the rural area in one way, but it's also going to deplete natural resources? How do you manage this tension, Minister Tilkainen, for instance?
Well, Nordic countries and Finland, of course, we have a very long history of sustainable forest management, more than 100 years, more than our independence. And the idea has always been that you can use maximum the annual yield, but even less, because forests have many different roles and services. They serve us biodiversity, they control water recycling, and they provide us with recreational opportunities as well. So material use is only one part of bioeconomy.
Right.
And actually we have set the target that we would like to double the value of bioeconomy within 10 or 15 years. And that means that we are investing a lot for research and development to find new kind of value-added ways to use this valuable, renewable material.
Right.
For textiles, biochemicals, biomaterials to replace plastics and so on and so on. Many kind of uses.
And one follow-up discussion we can have, if we have time or online, is also what happens when we do things sustainably in the Nordics, but then we send the wood to China, where the regulations are a lot less tight, and they produce the cellulosic fiber for us, send it back, and our bioeconomy is having a strong impact on the natural resources, but somewhere else. So I think that's really something we need to think about. Is there any thoughts around this? And Nancy, please.
But I think also, I mean, in the short run at least, and what we see is the collaboration between the waste sector and the agricultural sector, for instance. So it actually make both sectors better. If we can use the waste from the agriculture, also for fisheries, making biogas and nutrients, and sort of developing good methods.
Yeah.
And that is actually sustainable for all of us.
Yes.
And but it needs to be looked upon as a holistic process. It's not only producing fuel, for instance, like biogas. You need to include the way of producing nutrients, going back to agriculture. But then also you need to use the CO2 gas for greenhouse production of tomatoes, etc.
Right.
So sort of developing good processes, which is locally, actually, it's based on local production.
Yeah, and that's something I invite you to take you to the future to observe. Like in the circular economy, are we keeping the capital and the assets in the region, or is the capital shifting somewhere else? Because when you're on local markets and local production, then you control the whole chain. It's much easier to control the environmental impact as well. Maybe that's something you can think about through the observation exercise. Minister Tilkainen, you wanted to add something?
Sure. Well, I'd like to raise the role of forests and good sustainable forest management in climate change perspective.
Right.
Because in Paris Agreement, we have set a long-term target that emissions and removals must be balanced in the second half of this century. That means that we have to decrease emissions very quickly. But that also means that we need to maintain the productivity of our forests so that they will serve as a carbon sinks.
Right.
And actually, we should encourage all states around the world to improve the forest management so that the sink can be even bigger than today. It's definitely needed if we want to tackle climate change.
Okay. Those are good points. I wanted to stay for 1 minute on this idea of where should the capital go, because what kind of circle are we creating here? Is it still going to be a global market, capital moving abroad, but raw materials going back in a closed loop, but through the whole planet? Or are we trying to regionalize the assets and use the digital space and the knowledge platforms to streamline everything globally, but with the actual production and management going on in the country? Is there some discussion about this? I think that's also something we can debrief on later on. Ms. Kodia, if you have any points on this, because in Kenya, you're primarily looking at what's going to benefit the communities, right?
Yeah, but I think in the world of today, you cannot be a closed system. We are all interconnected. And in terms of efficiency in resource use and knowledge generation, partnerships become very critical, and therefore, and a country cannot be a partner of itself. Neither can a company be a partner of itself. And knowledge sharing, expertise sharing becomes very critical if we have to move to circular economy, because there's a lot of lesson learning and lesson sharing across the platforms. And I find that whereas countries can look inwards to optimize on their national policies, they will also have to anchor their positioning globally to find the relevance in a fast-changing technology and innovation space.
Okay. I'm going to ask if there's a question from the audience by any chance.
Yes, there's some great questions. In the interest of time, I think we only have time for one, but the discussion has largely been on governmental affairs. So how do you generate awareness amongst people on the street? Circular economy is high-level business at the moment. How to really engage people?
Let me share that from Kenya, how to engage people. I find that we can anchor that on the youth and information technology. Okay. Well, right now in Kenya, I find that when government makes a change in policy, it doesn't take the government itself to communicate, but the people among themselves using smartphones and so on, right. We have nowhere to hide information. It just goes out.
If there is value, they will find it. Yeah.
And every information has value, except that which has not been applied.
I'm going to just give you the word.
Yeah, shortly. So Citra has another focus area, resource-wise citizen, where we really try to nudge people to understand in ordinary life how to change the diet to vegetarian or more right. vegetarian, or how to choose bikes before cars, etc. Yep. So really, you have to go really into the citizen level and work with them in the grassroots level.
Okay, great. I think by now the other team should be done with their 2 missions. I'm going to try to make contact with Carlotta. Let's see if it works. Carlotta, can you hear me?
Yes, Camille, yes.
Are you done?
We're done. We're done, aren't we?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm going to ask first for a round of applause for my panel. Let's give a hand for this. And we should get into position, because sure. I asked the engineers if we could do like a double time travel, so it's a little bit easier to move on stage. So I'm going to send my team to you in the future, and you're going to send your team blue, back to the present. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you in your position, more or less?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm going to try.
I don't think it's working.
Yeah, 1 second. I forgot the reactor.
Oh, right.
Did it work? Yeah, they're here.
Yes.
They're all over here.
All right.
Let's give a hand for our time machine.
All right.
Okay, how about we sit here all together?
Hello.
All right. How did it go?
Fine.
Yes? Everyone made it?
Didn't hurt.
That's great. Please have a seat.
Thank you.
We're going to talk a little bit. So I'm excited about part 3, just to see what we're going to uncover. But first, we're going to talk a little bit about your work as well and your focus right now. We're going to go same format as I did with the other team. You were not here, but we went through the first round of introductions, and then we're going to dig in. We're trying to tease a little bit the audience with some interesting questions. I'm going to start with you, Elin. I think mission 1 and 2, they were about textile and fashion as a way to make the discussion a bit more practical, and that's your specialty area. You're making a lot of experiments as a sustainability director of Philippe Paquet, and I wanted to ask you, what are the business models that are most interesting according to you right now from the circular perspective, and that work, or that are going to work soon?
Well, there's actually so many out there, so it's quite exciting. Unfortunately, it's not that many that reach a big scale yet. So, but definitely looking at already from the design phase, have you considered the whole life cycle of the product already from the beginning? That's really interesting to look at.
Which is true not only for textile, but for all the sectors, of course.
Yes.
So the design stage, yeah?
Yeah. And then if we make products that are supposed to live for a long time, how do you make sure that they actually get that long life as they were meant to have? So that includes how can we increase repair service or actually help customers to care for their products during the user phase.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept to look at. But then also, I mean, we will probably always change clothes before they are worn out. Either we change style or, you know, we change size or whatever.
Yeah.
So how can we make sure that it's okay to do that and make sure that the clothes can keep living within another user?
Yes.
So the whole reuse concept is also really interesting to look at.
Yes, and I think we're going to talk quite a lot about the product as a service business model, which incentivizes companies in producing products that last, because the more durable it is, the more financial incentive you have because you're going to keep it on the market longer and be able to lease it longer and longer. So that's my favorite, I must confess. But we're going to dig into this. Minister Bolen, your focus is on financial markets and consumer affairs.
Yeah.
You have a lot of work, like everyone. But I wanted to name one initiative that was very visible last year in the circular economy world, where I'm going to read just to get the numbers right. But the Swedish government has introduced a reduction in the VAT rate from 25% down to 12% for repairing bicycles, shoes, leather goods, clothing, etc. And I think one that is quite interesting as well, it's a tax reduction for the repair and maintenance of white goods. So my fridge, my laundry machine, but when it's carried out in the home. So I think that's interesting, and I wanted to name it because that's a blueprinting element we can directly, replicate. Was it easy to do this? Is it how do you say, a silver bullet?
Well, it's been very appreciated in the Swedish policy space.
Yes.
On the other hand, of course, I had to convince the Minister of Finance that it was a good idea because, of course, it lowers the revenue from taxation a little bit. But I believe that it will actually increase the revenues for the government because it introduces new patterns of consumptions that are more labor intense. So repairing your goods is much more labor intense than just buying and throwing away.
Right.
So it's been very popular, and we see now an increased focus in the Swedish policy space around how can we maintain our goods, how can we repair them, and that's very interesting.
So another question is, Sweden does not have a comprehensive roadmap for circular economy as such, and how do you, are you a little bit like pushing for this? So you have some initiatives around sustainable consumption, which is a part of it. But
well, we are approaching to a blueprint for a circular economy in Sweden. So I've started with a strategy for sustainable consumption, where the taxation initiatives were taken, and that is of course also part of the SDG system. One of the sub goals for SDG 12, sustainable production and consumption, is using the taxation system in order to get the patterns going.
Right.
But we have also an inquiry that have looked at the circular economy and have come with very interesting suggestions on how we can adapt the policy space in order to really move rapidly towards a circular economy. So there's a lot happening in the Swedish economy at the moment.
And I trust you can use the Nordic cooperation also to really work with the other governments to...
Absolutely, absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Ms. van der Mee, thank you so much for being with us and jumping in on such a short notice. You are with the Ministry of Infrastructure and the Environment in the Netherlands. And it was very interesting digging into your work because you have a government program for circular economy with 5 priority sectors. And this circular economy agreement was signed earlier this year by all the stakeholders, including trade unions, which I think is very interesting. What does it tell you that even trade unions are on board and advancing on this agreement?
Well, it says something about circular economy not only being economic or ecological, but also being social. Right. This is also a social kind of question we have to be answering going up to 2030 and to 2050. So it's very important that there are a lot of stakeholders, over 280, have signed the agreement on circular economy. Which aims at 50% less use of raw materials in 2030. And it's very important that it's a multi-stakeholder agreement.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations. What is going to happen from here? I know you're working on a number of transition agendas, as we call them. The link is being tweeted to this government program as well. If you check on the hashtag, you can put it in your library. What's the roadmap for the rest of the year? Where's the focus right now?
Yes, well, we're working on these 5 priorities, and we're making the transition agendas, and by the end of this year, they will be finished. And we sent them to Parliament, and then the discussion will go on and on in Parliament, and then we can start executing the actions in the transition agendas. This is what will happen this year, and well, there are a few things I see for government to be taken care of, and in the Netherlands, we say we have to look at stimulating regulation, regulation that stimulates the transition to circular economy. But this is a bit boring, and that's why we said, well, more important it is to find room in regulation, to find room to have some experiments. And this is why we signed a Green Deal, and the Green Deal is about stimulating the trade between North Sea countries, to stimulate the market for secondary resources.
Yes.
And this is, well, there's 4 projects in it, and more to come, and welcome if anybody wants any resource to suggest. This is what we're working on a more concrete level.
And I think this is something I would really like. I talked with your team already about following up on this, maybe on the podcast show, doing a discussion about how do we make room in legislation, how the government can step in to, in the meantime, before the EU is figuring out the legislations and the adjustments, the national governments can step in and help the different stakeholders through those green deals, for instance, for I think it's the transboundary waste export.
Yes.
I really want to talk more about this, so I hope we get a chance to connect on this. And that's a very much of a highlight in the Dutch government program, I think. Maria Vilea, to you, Zero Waste Europe is based in Brussels. You're following from the NGO perspective what's going on with the EU circular economy policy package, and you work on very different aspects, waste and recycling, of course, but also product policy, extended producer responsibility. You really cover a broad range of issues, and also you're really championing a number of municipalities that are really showing the way towards 100% recycling. And it's very important to notice that they're actually in the south. Can you talk a little bit about this? Who are those champions in Europe? Mentioning that in recycling rates, we don't count waste to energy or the incineration of waste.
So it's part of our network, more than 400 municipalities that have committed to zero waste goals. This is the network of zero waste municipalities, and this is places where there is a continuous commitment to reduce residual waste. And we have examples that are really groundbreaking. For example, Contarina, that is reaching a separate collection of 85% nowadays, and they've reduced the residual waste per person per year down to 53 kilos, which is really a landmark in the EU. This is really, really amazing. So, yeah, we've seen there's been a really strong development in the south of Europe, also in France, also in other places in the UK, Scotland. But yes, it's true that in the south there is more.
Right. And one thing worth noticing on this is that a lot of those municipalities, they start really moving up their recycling rates once they give up on waste incineration, where until today, the sort of intermediary solution between landfilling and recycling, what we could not recycle easily was, okay, we're going to recover energy. And there's a lot of discussion about, should that be part of circular economy? Is there room for waste to energy in circular economy? And is that part of our blueprint?
I don't think so. I think that now that we are seeing circular economy, zero waste really becoming a real trend, I think incineration is just going to go down. This is what we see in Contarina, for example. Just to go back to this example, this success has been possible because they ruled out incineration as part of this.
How many people does this region cover? Like, are we talking about large municipalities?
I think it's 50 municipalities.
Okay,
so it's really like a large area.
Yeah.
So basically, I mean, if today they are having the separate collection of 85%, by 2030, if all cities in Europe would be doing the separate collection of 85%, incineration would be reduced to 75%. So I think that incineration is this model from the 80s, from the 90s, and this is what we see also in northern countries, that they have invested in this large infrastructure, that it's there, and has created a bit of a lock-in situation, a bit of an overcapacity, and thus, you know, it hasn't given the flexibility necessary to overcome that model, whereas in the south, this investment didn't happen, and there's been more opportunity and more flexibility to just don't go through the incineration stage. I think this is the lesson that it's important to bear in mind when we really want to build a circular economy.
So I have a tough question for Per Bolund, and you see me coming, like running, right? So I'm going to ask it because in Sweden, I'm a resident of Sweden, so I'm going to say we, but we have this excuse of, you know, there's so much waste to incinerate in Europe. So all those countries, they have landfilling. We're helping them basically recover their waste by importing it to Sweden, where we have overcapacity, and that's okay. And there's, you know, we have decades in front of us. And so my question, which I prepared, of course, is how do we, instead of importing waste to burn in Sweden, how do we export a circular economy system that helps those countries move faster towards higher recycling rates, using the zero waste roadmap, which is different than zero waste to landfill, right? So that's important to note in the media. And how is the Green Party engaging on this? Because I'm behind.
Excellent. Well, I think that we are in a lock-in position, and we have to start unlocking it, and we are working on that. So we are doing inquiries on how to get the economic system moving from incineration towards recycling, because we know very well from science that we can save so much resources and energy if we reuse and recycle instead of just incinerating. So we are moving ahead, and of course there's quite a long journey to go. But we are also not just incinerating, we are also actually champions when it comes to recycling our goods.
That's true.
So we have very efficient recycling systems, and I think that is something we can really give access to that kind of information to the rest of the world.
When you're going to convince the government about this Swedish circular economy roadmap,
well,
there will not be in the blueprint incineration, will there?
Absolutely. We are taking huge steps forward. So I think that more and more people, both within government and in politics, but also from the consumer side and also from the producer side and the business side, are seeing that we have so much to win for moving in a more circular pattern. And not least providing labor opportunities. I mean, the kind of mass production that we are stuck in today is very efficient when it comes to labor. So it's very automized. And if we can go to a pattern where we are reusing more, where we are refurbishing, where we are renovating our materials instead, that would provide lots and lots of new labor opportunities. And that would really solve a problem in many countries that we have a large part of the population that don't get access to the labor market today.
Exactly, and it's an opportunity for Sweden actually, because circular economy and recycling is labor intensive and not necessarily capital and infrastructure intensive. But I'm digging here because the issue of vested interest is pretty common. We see this back to the global brands, maybe the textile brands. We talked about this over the phone, Elin. There is, of course, the big brands, they are interested in innovating and figuring out what circular economy means for them. But many of them, they built an empire based on global supply chains, high margins, and I'm not sure the CFO and the shareholders, they're really happy. Everyone agrees that in the long term, there are benefits from everyone. There is even GDP growth if we want to talk about GDP, but I don't know if that's a good idea. Isn't there like two teams in those global multinationals where you have the sustainability department who's going to all the conferences and creating that green brand, but also a very silent sort of financial department who needs to get on board and understand also that it's not only tree hugging, but it's a matter of innovation because the disruptors are coming very quick. How do you see this through the research program that you're involved with
No, I think that used to be the picture, and it might be the major picture still, that there's a separate sustainability department that drives its own agenda kind of within the company. But that's starting to change. I mean, we have always had sustainability as an incorporated part of the whole business, actually, and even though sometimes it takes longer to get things done, in the end it creates a much more stronger force for change. Right. And we're starting to see that shift within bigger brands as well, where they try to integrate sustainability much more into the core business. So I think we'll see a big change there. And of course it's easier to start off from the beginning. You have a white piece of paper and you can just draw the map right from the beginning. But if you have a running business, that's the trick. How do you keep the running business going at the same time as you're starting to transform?
Because just to explain on this, for instance, we were talking about a product as a service. If you start leasing jackets instead of selling them, you're going to have a completely different cash flow structure in your organization, and that's quite a big transition. So a very good bridge to my next question. Ms. van der Meij, I wanted to ask you from the government perspective also, is it at the EU level through the European Investment Bank that we provide those financing instruments, or at the national level do we have also ways to help those brands make that transition? And are they making us cry, or do they really need help?
Well, help, I don't know if they really need help, if this is the right word, because what we see happening in society is that there are a lot of companies who are doing very, very good work, and they're doing it on their own account, and they do it by themselves.
Right.
But I think government should help in a way with the room in regulation, and also sometimes with a little push. Not only the forerunners, but also the other companies who have small companies who have a good idea, just to stimulate them and do the good things. So this is what we do as a government, just stimulating this.
Yeah. And I'm going to ask Mr. Borun also, you're very involved with climate finance and the financial markets, of course, and we've had a discussion on the Green Exchange podcast about how to steer capital towards climate solutions. Well, globally, but also at the national level. You've done remarkable work also with the AP funds and where the money is going, so congratulations on this. How do we, at the national level, help the large Swedish brands? I won't name any, but like, what is your position on this when it comes to capital investment?
Well, I think I see a golden match here. We know that there are so many investments needed to go to a fossil-free and a circular economy. Right. So we have a huge investment need. And at the same time, we have a huge search for sustainable investments from the capital markets in the world. Right. And for example, the AP funds and other pension funds around the world are really looking for the green solutions. So we just have to find a way to combine these two.
Yes.
And for example, the green bond market is growing extremely rapidly all around the world. And we see this as a great opportunity.
In the public sector or also in the private sector?
Both, actually. We see that in the Swedish market we have big government and municipal actors that are emitting green bonds for doing sustainable investments. Yeah. But we also see private sector actors moving into this market and seeing that this is a great opportunity for achieving good market factors, but also for showing that we want to be part of the solution for the future. It's really a strong signal towards other market actors.
Yes, and I want to talk more about this, of course. Matti, do we have a question from the audience? I think we have a minute.
Yes, I'll ask a short one because we are running out of time and only will have 10 minutes for the wrap-up. But there was an interesting one here that relates to what has been discussed already, and it was about extended producer responsibility. From Elina from Uusi Uutiset magazine. How do you see the role of extended producer responsibility in closing the loop of textile recycling?
So maybe something for Elina and Marielle. Those are your specialties.
No, I think it's absolutely necessary, and it's something that we actually want ourselves to. We need to be able to move into the future in the 2050 vision that we just had. We need closed loop systems. So in order, and having an extended producer responsibility, getting your clothes back, it's something that's actually really positive. You get a long-term relationship with the customers and you get a long-term relationship with your product, and you can learn much about your own products. So, and this is also a way of, in the future, securing resources, of course. So, I mean, there's so much business opportunity that lays in getting your clothes back.
Right. Marielle, very quickly.
Yeah, this is really the next challenge, to engage at the production level, and EPR can be a really good tool to cover more products, and the textile sector is really an inspiring one. We've been talking about getting modulated fees, for example, to ensure that products are more repairable, are more reusable, are more recyclable. All of eco-design area is definitely something that we need to work now, so that in 2050 it's a done deal.
Well, you've been to 2050, so
you
know already what's going on.
I've seen what's in there.
A very, very good transition. I'm looking forward to this. I think by now the other team should be done. I'm going to try to make contact one more time. And I hope, fingers crossed, that everyone will be back, because I don't want to get in trouble with the Finnish government. So I'm going to try to make contact. Carlota, can you hear me? Carlota, can you hear me?
Yes, Camille.
Are you done, or?
We're done.
I think.
Are we done?
Time is up, huh?
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to time travel you all back to the present. Yeah, if you want to get your team with you towards the position we agreed upon, and then we're going to work on the debrief. Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Take your computer, because we're going to need to visualize your work, so just make sure you don't forget it into the future. All right, let's go.
We're going to go back to the present.
I have a problem.
Yeah.
I'm gonna. I think you're stuck.
Oh no.
I'm gonna try again. I'm looking at the engineer team.
Okay.
I hope. There we go. Well, let's see. If you want to take positions in the meantime on the mark, thank you.
All right. Okay, now we're gonna go more or less.
Okay, here they are. Let's give them a hand. And let's give a hand as well to our panel. Thank you very much for the interesting discussion. So now is the moment that we're all waiting for. I think another moment we're all waiting for is a debrief of what you've been collecting. Everyone is fine? Everything went well? The doctor for the game show told me that you should drink a lot of water in the coming day or two, so just make sure you make a note. We have, let me see, We're going to take a couple of minutes rapidly just to summarize your points. The points that we're going to display on screen, they're going to be tweeted, they're going to be distributed by Citra, and we're going to make sure that you can dig in, collect all the good ideas for your own blueprints and see what the future looks like. And they will also be made available in the Nordic Lounge. I will talk about this in the closing notes. So, without further ado, wow. Look at that. Very clear. Can we see who is going to win first?
We'll be looking there.
So remember, you have a monitor here, so you don't have to turn.
Very nice.
I'm going to give the word first to Team Blue. Marielle, you were the captain.
Yes.
And I'm going to let you moderate this debriefing. I'd like to spend just 5 to 10 seconds per point, we're going to hear the score as they come. There's a sound that will be played, a sound like this.
Great.
So please go ahead.
Yes, so we had a really vibrant discussion, and we all agree that 2050 is going to look amazing. I'm going to give the floor to Elin to go through some of the key points that you raised.
Okay, so in terms of materials, we're beyond fossil fuels, okay? So, but it's a multi-diverse palette of different materials. It's going to be bio-based, it's going to be recycled, it's going to be from waste, from food, from greenhouse gases, etc. And it's also going to be lab-based.
That's
Okay, so Per, do you want to take over for production? Or?
Yeah, well, we believe that there will be a global production because we have efficient production patterns, but there will also be very, very localized production patterns where we are actually mending and repairing our goods and our clothes in the local neighborhood, in every block in our cities. So, and also refurbishing and remaking, and the maker movement will continue to grow until 2050.
Well, and then something about the business model. Leasing will be very, very useful in 2050. Leasing instead of owning your clothes. Well, that's, I think, a total different kind of thought you have to have about that. And, well, that will be the case in 2050.
Yes. And strong regulations, we also talked about that strong regulations would be strong because the challenges will be higher, but there will be a lot of incentives and there will be a lot of tools to make sure that behavior is really sustainable. Do you want to say about that?
Very quickly.
Well, absolutely. Of course, we know that we have great obstacles ahead, so we have to use the taxation system and the regulation actively in order to really make the market models of the future available today. The sharing economy has huge potentials.
Yeah.
So if we get the prices right, we think that the market models will develop.
Yeah.
Great. I'm just going to hold on and go to another mission from the other team to get some alternatives going. Let's start with mission 3, which was about the fundamentals of the bioeconomy in 2050. Kari, I'll give you the word.
Sure, I can start. So we discussed that soil health is in the core in the agricultural policies and practices, and also nutrients are circulating and used in a more precise way. In addition to that, meat consumption will be reduced and vegetarian diet increased.
Really? We're all going to be vegetarian?
Nope, but it certainly will be increased.
Okay.
And we were talking also about the sustainable forest management and really getting more out of current fossil fuel economy by increasing, for example, forest coverage more widely. And at the same time, make sure that carbon sinks are increased as well.
Very important. Okay, I give a bonus to this one. Any other comments, or you delegated everything to Kari, which is fine, huh? We're going to go to mission 2, which was about how will we shop in 2050. And here you're also consumers, so not only influencers. Let's go.
Yeah, it's going to be a really amazing experience with different varieties of things happening. We're going to actually go to hub services, and it's going to be possible to repair your clothes, to give it back, to maybe redesign so that it's innovative, it's creative, it's really cool. The materials you were mentioning, it's going to be really popular to be compostable, maybe edible kind of thing.
I give a bonus to this.
Elin, you want to say more about that?
No, you're doing fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else?
I think that also we will start sharing our clothes much more. We saw the car here standing 92% of the time. Actually, I think we all have suits in our wardrobes that are even less used than that.
Yes.
So if we can, subscribe to clothing services instead, someone comes to our door with a wardrobe every week and we leave it back after the week is done. So we can use our clothing material together and have a common wardrobe. I think that's a success story.
Interesting. I give a bonus as well. Well, it's going to be tight. I'm going to go back to mission 4, which was about how will we live in circular cities? What does the built environment look like? Mobility? How do we the capital also? Is it regionalized? A few points, please.
Sure. So we discussed that we need to transition from building and construction to living, meaning that we have plus energy houses, we are closing landfills, we get rid of plastic waste, and we get all material recycled. But more importantly, we have shared living spaces, and cities are walkable, so that you can really get somewhere.
No cars.
Yeah.
No cars, yeah.
Wow. You like this? No cars? No cars. Raise your hand. Interesting. You get a bonus here. Well, a few more points, please, Ms. Kodia. If you want to share anything, or.
Yeah, okay. we just said also the cities will be very clean, no waste, zero waste everywhere.
Zero waste? Any incineration?
Even with incineration, we will not need incineration when we have full circular economy, because most of the activities, consumptions will not generate waste.
Okay, super.
Yeah. And no poor people.
Great. That would be good. Mr. Tilikainen.
We also developed self-cleaning clothes so that we can get rid of washing machines and
self-cleaning clothes?
Yeah.
Air clean.
Self-cleaning clothes.
Wow, I hope I'm still alive.
Yes, but still we need some recycling to actually treat all the materials that are still there from the old economy.
Okay,
to sort of take it back to the economy and recycle it again.
Oh, I think that's very tight. I think we're going to give a round of applause to both teams and say that everyone wins. So, now, what is it that you win? That's the question. Well, you're not doing all this work for the credits. You're doing it because you're passionate. But nevertheless, we have a few gifts for you, and I would like to call Anina from the Nordic Council of Ministers to hand over to you a couple of gifts. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go through some. We managed to catch back on time, which is pretty good. I'm going to invite you to regain your seat, if that's okay, and to stay engaged in that discussion, because I'm going to give you a call so I can have you all on the talk show. Maybe we can have another hour on the telephone about all this, and I will tell everyone how to connect to this. But I would really like to thank you for playing the game and for the ambition, and this was really great. Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to try to do some closing notes. There's a lot to say, and I think we should see this more like a teaser session, but the good news is it's only the beginning of the event. It's time to wrap up, and I'm going to make a few practical comments. The first thing is that there are a lot of ideas, and we don't have the time to go through everything. So Citra Fund is going to distribute all those insights, so we can look at it from home, maybe, or from the office. And we're also going to download your questions, because we know it was very tight, and try to address some of those questions on the show, try to maybe via Twitter, so it's not lost. And we're producing a follow-up episode to that session in partnership with the Nordic Council of Ministers. So hopefully we can get a few voices on the phone and advance this discussion even further. The best way to follow the discussion, so yeah, you can find the Green Exchange on your favorite podcast app. All the instructions about the social media handles from the Nordic Council of Ministers and Citra, they're going to appear on screen, so if you want to take pictures, to make sure you follow them, and this way it will be easier to follow the discussion. Nordic Council of Ministers is issuing a web magazine called Green Growth, the Nordic Way, and you can subscribe for free in the Nordic Lounge, where we're going afterwards, or on nordicway.org. So that's also a good way to stay plugged to the discussion around, well, green growth in general, but I think there's some content about circular economy that is coming up. And last but not least, we have a ministerial mingle right after this session in the Nordic Lounge that's hosted by the Nordic Council of Ministers. And so you can come and ask your questions in person as well, if you're quick, and get a refreshment with all of us. Hopefully, after all this, no one stays hungry. I'm going to just give a bit of a summary, if you want maybe to record those ideas, and we are going to also display them in the lounge. A lot was said, but we talked a lot about cooperation, really. So cooperation between national governments, like with the example of the Nordic cooperation, which I think is really going a long way into streamlining a little bit of the work being done around sustainability. But also cooperation between the north of Europe and the south of Europe. What can we learn from those municipalities that are showing the way on recycling, for instance, but not only on how they're moving towards their circular economy roadmap. A cooperation between the north and the global south, right? Because even if countries operate in very different contexts, we can learn from each other, and there are some guidelines that we can follow in common, and I think that's very important. Between stakeholder groups as well, we've seen with the examples of the Netherlands and Finland that this collaboration between stakeholders is super important. And there are countries that are advancing comprehensive roadmaps right now. So hopefully you caught the links on Twitter from the Dutch government program, from the Sustainable Consumption Program in Sweden, all the resources from Avval Norway, all the resources we've talked about, they've been tweeted. A fundamental question about vested interest, whether it's at the government level on technology that is obsolete, or for brands on business models and financial systems that need to evolve. Where should the money go? Should we support infrastructure and technology or community solutions? That's, I think, a very important question. And the role of government is so important in making room for innovation and using the purchasing power. Yeah, are you? It's a lot of points, but we can regroup after the session. Finally, I'll leave you with backcasting. Let's use it as much as possible. You can do this at home with your family as well, at the dinner table. Like, what needs to happen for my children to be happy, self-accomplished, to operate in a world where we respect all of the sustainable development goals, we embrace them, and I think that's pretty much it. Hopefully this session will leave you with some inspiration. I would like to thank really the Nordic Council of Ministers and Citra and all the project team. I think we can give them a hand for making this session possible. I would like to thank also my team at Green Exchange, who's been preparing all the visuals and the sounds and all the production. Thank you guys, you've been great. Thank you, Carlota. It's a very challenging exercise that you've been through. Thank you so much.
Nice
and
adventure.
I give you a point. There you go. Thank you to the staff at the Finlandia Hall for helping us, and thank you to our guests for playing the game one more time. Thank you very much. So, with that, thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you at the Ministerial Mingle. And we'll be back soon with more green exchanges. Keep up the good work in the meantime. Thank you.